Ni mjinga sana. Yako.
Jana tumefanyaje? Jana tumefanya
probably the next hour or two. Sidhani utakuja home. Sawa.
Let's see.
So ni watu wengi wame
Stop joking. Tell your friend Ivan.
Hello. We'll be starting soon the second part of the program. But you're students, and I know a lot of students like myself. We used to like sitting at the back, hoping the teacher would not notice. So I'm asking those students in the back to please, let's move forward and fill up these chairs here so it's easier to see one another and have a better discussion, okay? All right? Guys, kujeni hivi karibu. Please, those of you at the back, if you can come forward, it would be excellent. Yeah? Kim. Let's
We would like to ask you to join the front seats. All these seats are reserved for you guys, so come closer. Those who are in the back seats, please come to the front. Hanyuma gahunda ikurikiyeho ngira mwayibwiwe ni ikiganiro mugiye kugirana na nyakubahwa ambasada na Father cyangwa Padiri Elize ni umuntu w'inzobere mu mateka n'inyigisho zijyanye na Genocide. Ariko turasaba ari inyuma muze mwigira imbere, inyuma cyane muze imbere. Padiri Elize niba uri muri sare wakwigira imbere. Is Father Elize in the room?
Wakanda. Kwanza najua kumulika. Piga simu.
Nayikuye. Hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. Hello. Please sit, please sit, okay. To speak. Excuse me.
Look good.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. A little bit of energy. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you. We are very, very pleased that you could stay up to this time. It demonstrates the seriousness with which you take this event today. My name is Abdul Rahman Lamin. I work for the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa, based here in Gigiri, where we cover 13 countries in the region, Kenya and Rwanda included. Today is a somber day. We have been commemorating and reflecting on the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda in 1994. This is the second segment where we want to give an opportunity to you young people to interact with the two experts that we have on the stage. I will introduce them in a minute. But as you heard this morning by various speakers, including His Excellency the Ambassador, one of the things they underlined in their speeches was the lesson that we learned from the experience of 24 years ago, and how do we ensure that it never happens again. You are the future. Actually, I don't believe in this notion of young people being the future, because the future is not tomorrow, the future is not next week, the future is not next year, the future is now. You are the future, but you are the present. And it is therefore important that we bring this conversation down to your level so that you, as you grow up in your own experience, as you begin to take responsibilities of leadership in your respective communities and societies, you are able to put in place the mechanisms that will help us correct the mistakes of the past. So this is going to therefore be an interactive session. We've had the speeches, we've had the context, and indeed, we've had the first-hand testimony. The testimony that was given today by the survivor was arguably the most powerful that I have experienced in my own time that I have participated in memorials of this kind. And so it is still fresh in our minds. And so therefore, what I'd like to do is to introduce our two distinguished guests. The first one, who you've already met, Ambassador James Kimonyo. I hope I pronounced it correctly. You forgive me if I made a mistake. But Ambassador, His Excellency, the High Commissioner of Rwanda to the Republic of Kenya, had given an official statement in the commemoration phase. But we would like to give him a further opportunity to reflect a little bit more, to tease out some of the issues. I mean, one of the points that he was making was, the ideology that underline genocide, that underline some of the mass atrocities that we see in the world, both historically and today. What is it that informs people's thinking to be able to draw the line where they create a divisive society that catapults into the kind of massacre that we experienced in 1994 in Rwanda against the Tutsis? When the United Nations was established in 1945, more than 70 years ago, it was established against the backdrop of a catastrophic war, where the international community said, never again would we sit by and allow the kind of atrocities that happened during the Second World War. But yet, in 1994, we saw the same happen. So the question we have to ask ourselves collectively as humanity, are we doing much to ensure that indeed we create that truly inclusive, truly multicultural, truly multi-ethnic society where, as we say in the UN, we should leave no one behind? So with that said, let me take this opportunity to invite you, Your Excellency. You may sit down if you choose to, or you can take the lectern if you want to speak from the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome His Excellency Ambassador James Kimonyo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramin, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, students from Rwanda, from Kenya, for participating in this second segment of our commemoration event. We want to thank, through you, Ramin, the administration of United Nations Office at Nairobi for giving us this opportunity that normally we don't have, because after every commemoration we disperse and go, but the idea of having a session dedicated to students, I think, is very, very important for us, because if you followed the remarks during the high-level segment, the statements that were made, we talked about many things, but we also touched on the future, and I think I agree with you, the future is today and tomorrow. It's very important to talk to the youth. Now, I have agreed with the Father Elise that I will do a brief introduction, because if you are in the first session, you followed my speech and my comment. So I would leave the other part. He teaches, by the way, so I think he's the best person to talk to the people from the academia than a diplomat. But for the benefit of our friends from Kenya, I know some Rwandese students who are here have gone through this kind of discussions in different events and training sessions, but would want to give you the context, a bit of a context of what happened in Rwanda. As I mentioned in my earlier submission, this continent has experienced a lot of conflicts, and I'm sure you are aware of those who study political science or conflicts and peace can tell where we have had black spots on the continent. But specifically why we have Rwanda as a case where we had a genocide is because of what I said. Human beings that lose their lives through any conflict, it is a very unfortunate situation. Whether it is a war, tribal conflict, or anything, or any dispute, and someone dies, it's very unfortunate. But we want to focus on this case, and we want to use the remembrance period to make sure that people understand that they can see the early warnings, that if we go that route, eventually what will happen is actually what happened in Rwanda. So for the genocide to happen, there are a number of things that you have to be aware of. When the political leaders begin to preach hate, they pursue politics of identity. And sometimes some of us become fanatics of a particular group. Then you should understand that from that point you are taking a wrong route. In early 1900, when Belgians came to Rwanda to colonize our country, like the British did for Kenya and other colonial masters, they found our society intact, living together. The Hutu and Tutsi reference were based on social groups based on the occupation. One group was predominantly farmers, another one was predominantly cattle keepers. That was the difference. You can trace our history anywhere, in any literature. You will never find a conflict between Hutus and Tutsis. There's no indication in our history for many, many centuries where Hutus and Tutsis fought. Never, ever. So you can't call it tribal or ethnic conflict. It is actually based on what the colonial masters brought in terms of trying to weaken our unity through their famous policy known as divide and rule. Divide and rule tactic was used to weaken the African kingdoms and chiefdoms to make sure that they pursue their interests. That's what happened in Rwanda in 1993. the identity cards that reflected each one's ethnic group were issued for the first time in our history. So now you have the ID that shows you are James Kimonyo, and your ethnic identity is reflected on your ID. So when you go seek for a job, for scholarship, for anything, someone knows you are from a particular group because it is reflected on your national ID. And you understand much later that that would be used now to identify the victims to be killed. Now, that was during the colonial time. A very unfortunate story that I would want to tell you, and I don't want to dwell on that so much because colonization did a lot of harm to the continent. But I want to focus now on the post-independence period where now Rwanda becomes an independent state in 1962. But I wanted to also highlight something that is very critical. In 1957, around the time when the wave of independence was blowing on the continent, when Kwame Nkrumah's, Nyerere's, Jomo Kenyatta and others were fighting for the independence, the Rwandan king was also pushing and actually had sent an envoy to New York to push for the independence of Rwanda. But Belgians were not ready to leave at that time. They were not anticipating that Africa was going to be independent at that time. So they resisted what the king was doing. What happened? They killed the king and mobilized the other group of Hutus that they considered to be majority, now to turn against their fellow countrymen and women who are Tutsis. So in 1957, a Hutu manifesto is developed, which tells the Hutus how different they are from the Tutsis. I'm trying to show you the build-up now of the hate. In 1959, on 29th of September, 1959, someone called Joseph Gitera develops what he called 10 Hutu commandments. You can go on your phone and look at the 10 Hutu commandments. They are ridiculous. They talk about how Tutsi women are untrustworthy, how their Hutu girls are beautiful and good, how Tutsi businessmen are untrustworthy, and many things that were cheap. But in essence, the commandments were trying to instill in the minds of the fellow Hutus that these are different people. Don't trust them. Don't do business with them. Don't get married to a Tutsi man. Or don't get married a Tutsi woman because these people are untrustworthy. And you'll be surprised that in 1990, when before the genocide happened, someone called Hassan Ngeze reproduces the Hutu commandments in a newspaper called Kangura on 22nd of November 1990. That's to show the history of divisions and hate that will form now the precursor to the genocide that happened in 1994 to kill the Tutsis. The history is very long, how they were discriminated in schools. You heard Josephine, the one who gave the testimony, how they would tell the class like where you are here. The teacher will start by saying, do you know how a Tutsi looks like? You are there, you are students, and you are waiting the teacher to begin teaching you. What he starts doing is to say, do you know how a Tutsi looks like? And then he will say, okay, let me tell them, then they call names, Josephine, Mary, Jackie, John, stand up. And then the rest of the students will, they just become like a laughing stock. So in your mind, you grow up in that condition, you are already discriminated, and you feel so inferior. The other group will feel superior, but also they consider you to be the victim. And those are stages of genocide, which I think Father Elise is very good at that. And I don't want to dwell on that. But let me say that the ethnic identity cards, the hatred that was entrenched in the hearts of the people, the polarization of our society, ensuring that you live together in the same country, but you know they are them and we are us, they are untrustworthy, don't marry them, don't trade with them. That forms the basis of now what the ideologists, the genocide ideologists will use, because you have built now the foundation. You have the identity cards that show who is who. They have actually described even how they look like. Even when you don't have your national ID, I look at your face and say, I know who you are because this is how you are described. If you watched properly, it was so fast, maybe, I don't know, the further you have the picture, that shows how, because there was no any political science definition of, or scientific definition of ethnicity in Rwanda, they had to use physical measures to describe our ethnicity, which is very ridiculous. But as ridiculous as it was used to actually identify the victims, and that's how genocide is committed. So in 1994, that's what happened. Time had come for the Tutsis to be killed. The story of aircraft being brought down, that is something that you needed to, those of you who are doing research, who are studying, you should understand this thing, that the presidential aircraft that was brought down, whoever brought it down, but we know for sure, it is the extremist element within the military that was protecting the president that brought him down, because at some point he was conceding power to share power with the cockroaches, with Tutsis. I jumped a bit of the history of why the Arusha Peace Accord was being negotiated, because there was this liberation law whereby the international community brought together the fighting parties to come and form a broad-based government and build the country. But the extremists within the other party that was ruling the country was not aware to share power with the people they considered to be not theirs, the other group. You understand that? So now the aircraft is brought down, the president dies with the others, and including the president of Burundi. That becomes the reason why the genocide happens. Now, listen to this. You live somewhere, let's use Kenya. You live somewhere in Bungoma, or in Mombasa, or in Kericho. Someone somewhere is killed, and you're a young boy or girl. They come after you because the president's plane has been brought down. Because I don't want you, when you are reading about the genocide or doing a research, to be confused. It doesn't make any sense. How does a 3-year child be killed because the president has been killed? Whoever killed him. That's an illustration of how genocide ideology prepares the killers to kill anybody using any justification. So the genocide is meant to exterminate a group of people based on nationality, religious, ethnicity, and racial of a particular group, with the intent to completely wipe it out or even kill it in part. That's the definition of 1948, 9th of December, by the UN Convention. So it can't be related to the accident of bringing out the presidential aircraft. It is something you can imagine those who are being killed. You had the testimony when the parents of Josephine were going to be killed in 1959. I think there was no any incident of a presidential aircraft that was brought down then. Those who were killed in 1973, there was no a presidential aircraft that was brought down. It was based on the genocide ideology to exterminate a particular group. So genocide happened in 1994, as we said this morning. 1 million is gone, killed because of how they were created. It didn't matter whether you are in the military, whether you are old or you are young. What the killers were doing was that they wanted to now this time, unlike what they did in 59 and 73 and the other years, to completely wipe out this ethnic group called the Tutsis. Little they know that you can't exterminate, you can't wipe out. Even the Nazis tried and killed 6 million Jews, but they did not manage to finish everybody. So that's why you have survivors like Josephine and others. And they went as far as not killing people who are living, but also killing those who are still in their mother's wombs. So that once they are done with it, nobody is going to be born out of any survivor or anything. So they killed everybody, literally. We have some horrifying cases where they even grilled children they put them on the grill. In one of the churches toward the southeastern of Rwanda, they were banging children against the church wall. They killed them without, so they were saying we should not use our bullets or pangas, just hit the head. When you go to that memorial, you see the blood splashed on the wall. So it was so bad. Now, I want to end up here and let the students maybe ask specific questions, and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I don't know if you would mind we go to the next presentation, and then we can invite the students to ask questions. But thank you very much for situating the discussion in a historical context. And I think this is important for you young people, because oftentimes when we see a situation, we have a tendency to respond. I mean, by human nature, we have the instinct to respond to anything that is evil, that is terrible. But we rarely step back to ask the question, what precipitated this situation? If you listen to the Ambassador Kinley, he has put this in the context of history. The colonial contact between Europe and Africa, is one of the issues that he raised. But we will come to that. He talks about issues of early warning. I mean, why do we need early warning? Today, the UN, through the Secretary General, is pushing for the culture of prevention, because after all, in the most simplistic way, they say prevention is better than cure. It is better to prevent something from happening than to respond. To what extent have we evolved, have we put in place the early warning mechanisms that would prevent the kind of mass atrocities that we said? He defined genocide through the legal instrument, the international legal instrument. Genocide is not just one murder. It's not just the act of killing. It's the act of killing with the intent, listen to me now, with the intent to wipe out a whole people. It could be ethnic, it could be racial, it could be religious. You target a specific population. That's why it's the most heinous of international crimes. I mean, what kind of mentality informs that? He talks about the intellectual foundation that are laid by people who are supposed to give guidance to how we build a positive and more inclusive society. Rather, we are developing manifestos based on our own ethnic inclination. So these are issues that I would like you to reflect on as I invite the next speaker. I will give him the opportunity to say a little bit about his background, but so allow me to invite Father Elise Rutagamba, who is a lecturer in systemic theology from Hekima University College here in Nairobi. Father is a professor, and he will tell you that in the academy, they have this thing called is PowerPoint or perish. He's going to do a presentation, and you are used to that. You're a university student, so you like to see slides. He will do that, and then after that, we will open up for interaction. Father Hekima, Father Rutagamba, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, MC, for this opportunity. It's a distinguished honor to address you, my younger brothers and sisters, the leaders of Africa for tomorrow. And today, you are the leaders, you will be the leaders you are today. So just to give a little bit of my background, I'm a Jesuit priest from Rwanda. As he said, I'm teaching at Hekima University College, which is a constituent college of Kweya, Catholic University of East Africa. So my area of interest and of expertise is social ethics. So I've done a lot of work on genocide studies, post-colonial studies, on issues related to social justice and human rights and so forth. So I'm here today to be able to discuss with you, but to lead you into this discussion and open up this reality of genocide, this time not from the perspective of Rwandan history, but I look at it from a broader picture. And the reason I chose to do this way is because when the genocide took place in Rwanda, I was almost your age or a little older. But most of our generation, we did not know exactly what genocide is. Even though we knew about the warning signs, we did not have a sense of what genocide is all about. So it is crucial as you train in your universities, in your different respective disciplines, to know what genocide is, because you can be in better condition to actually address it. And believe me, I trust you. I know you can do better even than the diplomats. And today you are more equipped than ever before. By the time the genocide took place in 1994, we did not have social media. But today, already from here, we have heard about impunity, about people who are touring the entire world with the scars of what they committed. With your phone, you can make a difference. And I challenge you to start from today. Now, allow me to go through some of the slides. I'm aware that some of the things have been said, so I would be skipping some of the slides so that I can take you into some major issues that would allow you to open up for discussion. So I'm looking at the origin of genocide, the conditions of genocide that makes it possible for genocide to take place, the motives that lead people to commit a genocide, and then go through the 8 stages of genocide. And this is very crucial because it allows you, even your own context, to see what is being cooked if a genocide is to happen even 50 years afterwards. Now, let me start with the origin of genocide. Genocide is as old as humankind. And it is surprising that despite that very fact, we still don't understand it. We still don't know it for sure. Now, if you go through history, you will see that there was genocide in prehistoric times, in antiquity. You move on to modern time, you have a series of genocide during that time. And then you get to see that there is a whole history of the term of genocide. So I'll take you through the definition that I've come up with today, which is quite a stride if you think about it. Now, in prehistory and antiquity, I guess some of you guys read the Bible. So if you go to Joshua chapter 10, you'll be amazed that genocide is actually being ordered by God himself on behalf of his people. And Joshua is commanded to go to wipe out not only human beings, but whatever is living. These are the texts we read on a daily basis. You know about the firstborn in Egypt. Go clear every firstborn in Egypt. We do know also after the birth of Jesus, all young boys of his age had to be cleared so that he can be killed among them. So this is already instances of genocide in these pre-historical times. Now, when we move on to modern time, actually, one of the major genocides took place here in Africa. It was the genocide of the Hereros in southern Africa. And it was committed by the Germans who were trying to occupy the land. But of course, this genocide was not acknowledged. It was not acknowledged. Why? Would you know why? Because the very people who should actually acknowledge it, they are in charge. And this is not just what happened this was a mass killing on a larger scale, but this happened in all our liberation wars when we acceded to independence, where so many people got killed. Now, these people were not called people who are freedom fighters. They were insurgents. They were revolting against the order, which was the colonial order. So because the colonial are the ones who were writing history, so whatever happens, it's their mistake, they are going against the law. That's it. Now, after that we have, and this was back in 1904 to 1905. So the death toll of that time was 6,000 people, Ureros being killed by the German soldiers. But by the way, during this period, we have had one of the most important resistance in Africa, because these people were able to resist until they causes to what they call total war, which means you kill whatever is in your front, including children. And so the African fighters, the Ureros, could not stand to see people who have no heart, who could actually bang babies, old women, and so forth. So they retreated in the mountains, and they cleared those who could not make it to the mountains. Now, when you go to 1915, as you can see, genocide is actually repetitive. This time is taking place with the Armenians. And it's a genocide that was committed by the Turkish, and the death toll of that time was 1.5 million. And you have the Nanking massacre in China at the hands of the Japanese. This took long to be admitted as a genocide. But still, it is a form of discord between the two nations. And this claimed 300,000 people. And then in 1942 to 45, you have the Holocaust, in which the Nazi Germans, during the Second World War, killed 6 million Jews. But the killings claimed many more people, because you had also, apart from the Jews, you had the Poles, you have the Gypsies, you had the homosexuals, you had the physical and mental handicapped. And you remember the idea here was to preserve the Aryan race, which was supposed to be a pure race. So even among them, those who would show some kind of disabilities, they were not qualified to live. So they were cleared ahead of the Holocaust itself. And now you move to 1975 to 79, you have the Cambodian genocide. This was ideological kind of genocide, where the leaders wanted actually to implement a policy, an agrarian reform, and whoever didn't agree with that was marched to death, and they cleared all of them. And those who suffered the most was the intellectuals. Those people who were able actually to speak out were the ones to be killed first. Now, 1991 to 95, you have the Bosnian genocide. And this is very important, by the way. We should be aware of this. When the genocide took place in Rwanda, one of the reasons people didn't want to intervene was that this was another instance of savages killing each other. So they had no reason to intervene, because they are used to kill each other. They are savages. They are not human beings. So this is included into the dehumanization of Africa. That's why we should be aware, because wherever you are part of this. Now, 1994, then you have the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda, which claimed 1 million people. We shall come back to this. You know, you have several figures. Some talk about 500, others 800. Here, the UN, they tended to take the midway and talk about 800. But we know it was even more than 1 million. There was a census that took place. There was a little larger than 1 million people. And I will see how people play the figures and why they do that. And if someone tells you it was only 500, you know where he comes from. And you know the role, either his country or some of his connections or his profession, you know, are holding that figure. And you can tell so many other things. Now, the history of the term of genocide is quite surprising, as I said, that this has been with us since the very beginning of humanity. And yet, up until 1948, we do not even have the name of genocide. Why? And some of you who study in different disciplines will be amazed to see that social sciences were the first ones actually to fight against even, the naming of genocide. If you look at positivism, it is stratifying people. There are people who are at the theological age, others who are on the philosophical age, others who are on scientific age. And now those who are in power would put themselves at the pinnacle, which means the rest do not count. If you think about the anthropology of 19th century, which actually brought this whole, what they call physical science, where you have to measure the nose, the eyes, the pigmentation of the skin, and all these kind of things, and then separate people along those lines. So you wouldn't have anthropology to fight against genocide because it is actually not only supporting it, but it's justifying it. Do not even forget about religion. You get to see that most genocides, religion element is key because religion is the only thing that gives us the reason to live and to die. So if you are convinced that you are commanded by God, you are ready to commit suicide. You are ready to kill. And so most genociders always use religion to justify themselves. Go to South Africa. The apartheid used actually a biblical narrative to claim the land as God-given land, instead of realizing that they have grabbed the land of people and started exploiting it. Now, we do not have, at the very beginning, the treaties we have today, because this came a little later. So one of the reasons is, first of all, because social science that should enlighten people on this very issue were involved in justifying it. Religion was involved. Political leaders, those who are dominant, they were the ones who were committing actually genocide. I came back to Bosnian genocide and I told you it was very important because this happened in the heart of Europe. The civilized people. The very same era as it happened in Rwanda. Which means genocide has no color, genocide has no specific geographical area. Genocide can happen anywhere. All you need to have, bad government, bad ideology, and people who are helpless. Most of the time, by the way, genocide is committed by young people like you, but is also prevented by people like you. So if you are jobless, if your life has no perspective in the future, whomever would come and embark you onto this kind of project, you would go, because you have no choice. But I trust you wouldn't go if you are aware of the implications. Let us move to the next slide. Next. The definition of genocide. We have three types of definitions. There's the etymological definition, the sociological definition, and the UN Convention definition. Now, the etymological definition was coined by a young man called Lemkin, who is actually responsible for creating this word genocide. He witnessed firsthand the Armenian genocide. And from then, as a young man, he started actually, as he was studying law, he started fighting against it. And then when the Nazi occupied Poland, he moved to Sweden. And it is from Sweden he continued to work on this concept. And he later on moved to New York, where he was pushing for these terms. Now, next slide. At the time, some of the government who were in power, who could see like their government mistreating their own people, they did not have a name to call genocide. Churchill, the Prime Minister of UK, or the time of the Second World War, he referred to genocide as a crime without a name, because there was no way to name it. It was just beyond anything that has happened before. And so Lemkin would continue to fight And he wrote, actually, a book in which he was trying to define this concept of genocide. And he relied on two genos, which is a Greek word, and cide, which comes from Latin cida, killing a race or a tribe. But it's not just killing, it is wiping out. But as we are associated with nature, we have all kind of ramifications in our life. Genocide does not kill only a human being. The environment is part of, the victims. Social relations, we talk about the genocide of Tutsis in Rwanda, but would be amazed to know how many other African nationalities who got killed in the process. Even non-Africans, Europeans, people who seem to look just like the way they describe Tutsis, were also butchered. And so there's also a sociological definition, which is quite broad. I'd like to read it. Genocide is a form of one-sided mass killing in which a state or other authority intends to destroy a group as the group and membership in it are defined by the perpetrator. So this is a broader kind of definition which have the element of targeting an entire group, the whole or in part, and this includes all kind of other mass killing. But this is not the definition we work with because it is too general. It doesn't really help to actually, if you have to take legal measures, to be able to go for it. And so there is another definition which was beat up by Lemkin and ended up being ratified in the UN. And I want you to pay attention to the elements that make this definition. Genocide means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, religious group as such. This word as such is very important. First of all, the intent, and it's good to understand the intent. The target of genocide is just killed because of who he is. It's not because you have done anything wrong. As the ambassador was saying, a baby of 2 days or 2 months, you cannot claim that he's responsible for any wrong. But so you are killed simply because you belong to this group that is being targeted. Now, in the process of genocide, there are so many people who get killed, either because they fight against the ideology, because they don't share, the project, or because they happen just to be in the area where they are killing other people. And because genocide takes place always in war situation, there are people who are victims of war. Now, it is very important to understand why, as Ambassador said during his intervention, we are very sensitive to the resolution that took place recently, which was to say this is a genocide against the Tutsis. It doesn't mean there are no Hutus who got killed. As I'm telling you, there are also non-Rwandese who got killed. But these were not the target of genocide. They have been killed for other reasons. By the way, we have also some Tutsis who got killed prior to the actual implementation of genocide. But those who got killed at that time, they were targeted as Tutsis. Simple. Nothing. So that's why we said the genocide against the Tutsis. And we'll come back to this when I talk about the denial, to understand why we have to make these differences so that people don't confuse the situation. Now, the following acts: killing members of the group, so actual killing, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. You may, for example, have intent of eradicating a group, and you might not use machetes or weapons. For example, if you kill all the men, you espouse all the women, and you make sure that whoever has that blood is completely out, that's a genocide. Because you are actually committing acts that lead to the extermination of this group. Now, so the inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the extermination of this group. So there are so many ways to do this. That's why you have to be very sensitive, and you'll see when it comes to the legal approach, you can make a case of someone committing genocide because they have done one of these acts. Now, let's move to the next. The jurisdiction of genocide. So here I wouldn't bear much on this, but if you have been accomplice, if you have revealed the hiding of people who are targeted for genocide, if you have held hate speech, all those are acts that are persecuted under the act, under the Convention on Punishment and Prevention of Genocide. So it is very important to understand every single detail of this process. Next. Now, let us look at the conditions of genocide. First of all, there are political conditions. When you look at the political structures, there are some conditions that make genocide possible and even easy to implement. But there is also the context. Now, in terms of political structures, the regime in place, if you have a dictatorship, it's much easier to commit a genocide because the dictatorship dictates everybody what to do. There are no people protesting. If you protest, you get killed. So that's why we cherish democracy. There is no genocide possible if you live in a democratic regime. Because, and by the way, democracy is not just about elections, because you tend to be misguided. Democracy, first and foremost, means respect of human dignity. That's number one. And respect of human dignity is not simply respecting our body integrity. It's respecting our emotions, respecting our psychology, respecting our intellect, every single thing that composes who we are. Number two, democracy is about the rule of law. If you know that if there is someone who is against you, who's harming you, can be persecuted for that. If you leave your car in the parking and you know because of the rule of the law, no one would just get into it and steal things, that's democracy. And this is very important because we tend just to be distracted and think that, going to demonstrate in the street, that's the democracy. Democracy is also, by the way, to have something on your table, to be able to feed your children, to be able to have a job, a dignified job, not to have to rush to Europe to go to clean latrines to survive, whereas you can, have something to do in your own life. Now, if you have a dictatorship, if you have authoritarian systems, like we had in Germany, Hitler, Mussolini in Italy, we have our own here in Uganda, Idi Amin, Franco in Spain, all were people who would not accept a single discussion, who would just dictate the way. So once you have something like that, it's very much easier to commit a genocide. In the case of Rwanda, everything was around the government and the party, with the ruling party of the time. So the ruling party was able to mobilize all the infrastructure, all the apparatus of the state, police, army, administration, judiciary, you name it. And then when you have, these are instances of leadership, where you mobilize these people to commit a genocide, the rest of the population just have no choice. They just follow. Yeah. Now, in terms of the context, genocides always occur in the context of war. In the context of war. So there is, for some reason, a war going on. In the case of Rwanda, there was a liberation struggle where some people who have been banned from their country told that the country is so full, it's like a glass of water. So there is no space to put in other people. Now imagine if you are a father or a mother. Can you tell some of your children that the house is too small, so you guys find a way to survive? It doesn't make sense. So that was the situation. Now, if you have people who are doing something like this, and all means were completely useless. So the only means that was remaining was to recourse to the struggle for liberation. So it is in this process that the genocide occurred. Now, why the war situation is a condition for genocide is because already during wartime, people are afraid. So the recourse to fear, the recourse to the media to mobilize people becomes much easier because people are already afraid. So if you tell them if you do not do A, B, C, D, you die or you get killed, so it is very much easier to mobilize them. Next. Now, what are the motives of genocide? Why do people engage into committing genocide? The first motive is to destroy a group that is perceived as a threat to the ruling power. If you do not want to share power, and you know there is a group that is really attempting to get the power, so to preserve it, then you have to eradicate the other side. Second motive is deeply rooted in emotions and involves destruction of those who are hated, despised, conversely are envied or resented. So you have a government that has already classified people, and some are supposed to be inferior, to be useless, to be people who have nothing to do, who actually are excluded from this social life. And then if you induce the rest of the population to hate these people, it is a good enough reason to actually appear to hate and so forth, end up in genocide. But you might be, like the Jews, for example, in Germany, in most of European countries at the time of the Holocaust, they were very successful. Intellectually, business-wise, they were the best lawyers, and so people envied them. And so they started targeting them, and as is always the case, when you have internal problem, you tend to scapegoat someone else for your own ills. And that's how the Jews were actually targeted as, the victims of genocide. Now, the third motive is the pursuit of an ideological transformation of society. This was the case in Cambodia. They want to make an agrarian reform, and whoever didn't want to engage into this was just to be cleared. But now, how do you know? Because this was based on opinions, political opinions. How do you know who holds this opinion and who does not? We'll see how they proceeded into actually this classifying of people and so forth to be able to make those dividing lines which did not exist before. Fourth motive is purification, the attempt to eliminate from society perceived alien beliefs, cultures, practices, and ethnic groups. So if you have people, like the Jews, for example, they would say, because they were very cosmopolitan, they have links all over the place, or all over the globe, these people are the people who are bringing us diseases. So we should eradicate them so that the society can be pure. So once you feel like some people are not really people, either because you accuse them of having a special condition that disqualifies them to be part of the society, or because you think these people are strangers, you tend to actually push them away of society so that everyone who has to interact with them feel they don't really have the quality to be part of the society. The fifth motive is the economic gains. In Rwanda, during the genocide, they would tell the peasants that if you go kill your neighbors, you inherit their properties, you inherit their cows, you inherit all you have, all you want. And this had happened before. In the 60s, the people who killed their neighbors, they were promoted. Some got a post in the government, others were promoted in society. And so they had that experience. Now, when you appeal to them, say, go and kill, and then you inherit whatever you want, people just go for it. I'm sure our brothers and sisters who are from Kenya, they know the value people attach to the land. So if you tell people you are going to give them the land, it's a trap, and people just go for it. Now, I want to take you now through the stages of genocide so that you can tell, even from the societies you come from or some you study of, you can tell if this society is leading to genocide looking at these stages. And these stages were coined by a professor at Yale University called Stanton Samuel. He is an aged man, but he has also some connections in his family of people who survived the Holocaust. He's one of the leading scholar in genocide studies. Now, stage number 1 is called classification. Stage number 2, symbolization. Stage number 3, dehumanization. Stage number 4, organization. These are stages that prepare for genocide. Now, after those ones, it is actually the implementation of genocide. Then the stage that follows, can go to next, or shall come back to that. Let us go through classification. This has been said before. You tend to divide the society into as this as them, either tribe-wise, either religious-wise, you name it. You can just find whatever. And in the case of Rwanda, it was very difficult to do this because Rwandan people are Rwandan people. Even the notion we have inherited, we tend to use, ethnicity, it doesn't qualify. If you are aware of the social science definition of ethnicity, we do not have. We share language, we share the geographical space of living. Even in the genealogy, we have all the different composition of our society. Now, to be able to actually divide and create that link, that filter in between the society, they had to recourse to racial studies of 19th century. They had to do an administrative reform which discriminated, systematically. They had to create schools in which only one part of the population, not actually the whole part, only the guys they wanted to be serving in the colonial auxiliary administration. And they would have a specific education imbued with all this notion that they are special, others are different. Now, so there is a bipolarization within the society. There is, one of the methods actually is to not only to divide people, but to make sure that these people engage into conflict. Let's pass to the next. For example, if you can see here, the ambassador was talking about it. These were some of the research done by the anthropologists of the time to show that from the length of the nose, from the eyes, from the shape of the head, you can tell who is a Tutsi and who is a Hutu. As a matter of fact, they had also a strategy. In the literature, they spread all over the place. If you go to the libraries, you see all the books from before the 60s. You would see that whenever they would take a picture of a Tutsi, it will always bottom up. And to show he's very tall, to show all these features they just built almost in a lab. And whenever they would take pictures of Hutus, they would just take the picture from the other way around. And so you get to see that, for some of us who would, recognize some of the people, you would know that those people who are seated there, they are not all Hutus. But the picture would tell you these are Hutus. So it was really coined, for the sake of just dividing people. Next. Now, you see, for example, the next stage is the symbolization. Dividing people is not always easy because people have so many affinities. Now, you have really to engage in a symbol. Now, the symbol is very important. Symbol is far different from a concept. A concept is, it cuts into reality. but the symbol is all, embracing. And people understand symbols in different ways. Each one of you would take a symbol and just give it a meaning and make it justify his life or not. So the Nazis, for example, they had the swastika. Now, to distinguish them from the Jews would have the Star of David. And you would see, next slide, this is in Rwanda, where on the IDs they talked about. But I want to show that during the Holocaust, all Jews would have the Star of David, on their wearings. And so they would be able to distinguish who you are from the street already. Next. Now, in passports, for example, the Jews would have the G letter in their passport, as opposed to the rest of the Germans who would have this second, the one in the middle. And you could see for what I was talking about the Star of David. Next. In Cambodia, those who were not espousing the ideology, they would give them this blue scarf. And so that would be a way of distinguishing them from others. Next. Dehumanization. Dehumanization is done in hate speech. It's also using symbols. It's using all kind of things to deprive you from humanity. Reference to the person as a vermin, as a disease, as, you name those kind of things that make you feel like I have nothing to do with this person. I cannot share anything with this person. Now, it also invokes a sense of superiority. The targeted group is considered to be inferior. People are useless who can do anything. And then the perpetrator is shown to be more superior and more powerful and so forth. Now, there is a use of euphemisms because, you cannot mobilize people around a bad ideology or a bad project. So they do not say we are going to commit genocide or we are going to kill. You hear words like cleaning, purification, which are good words. Even the perpetrators do not call themselves perpetrators. In Rwanda, they call themselves Interahamwe, which means those who work together, and which is, refers to something that is good. So you get to see that these euphemisms help people not to connect their moral responsibility to the action they are going to commit. Next. Yeah, these are illustrations of the dehumanization. Let's go to denial. Denial. This is very important because it is the last stage of genocide. And genocide is being denied before, during, and after. And why do they deny it? It's simply because, what I was saying a few minutes ago, you cannot be able to mobilize people around a bad thing to do. So they hide. Now, they hide during the commission of genocide itself. You do not go to show off that you are killing people. Because, of course, everyone, even the killers themselves, they cannot have the strength to continue looking into the eyes of people they are clearing, knowing they are human beings. So they have to have a kind of cover so that they do not endorse that kind of responsibility. Now, there are tactics of denying. One of them is to deny the evidence. This is after the genocide had taken place. You deny the evidence. So deny that there was any mass killing at all, question and minimize the statistics, and this is what I was talking about. If you ask those who are perpetrators, they would say, no, actually the number of Hutus who died were higher than the one of the Tutsis, and so there was no genocide. There was, or they caused to double genocide. Now, they would also block access to archives, which is happening right now in France. France was very much involved in the perpetration of genocide in Rwanda because they were sponsoring the very government which was committing genocide. Now, for the last 24 years, there is always an appeal to reveal the archives so that people can know exactly what happened, but they do not make the step up to now. Now, there's also intimidation and killing of witnesses. And we witnessed this in Rwanda. As the Gacaca judiciary systems was going on, and the UN tribunal in Arusha, you would have so many survivors who got killed because they were the only people who held the evidence. And so when you remove the witnesses, of course, there's no way to restitute the truth. Now, the second, yes, I'm finishing. Now, the second tactic is attack on truth tellers. What's the next? Denial of the intent. This is very important. Like even in Rwanda, they said, no, it was war situation. The people were being killed. There was really no intent to, to target the Tutsis, which is not true. Because this was in the media, it was in political speeches where the definition of the enemy was quite clear. And in the definition they say, who is an enemy, every single Tutsi, whether he's in the country or out of the country, any person who is associated with the Tutsis, either by marriage or by profession and so forth. So you find this in the 10 Commandments Ambassador was talking about. Now, blaming the victims. Blaming the victims to say they deserve what happened to them. Because you can find all kind of ills that they caused, and so they become the people to blame. Next. Now, there are current, sometimes people deny genocide to secure some political interest. It could be also security, it could be that they are pressurized into denying so that like those who have greater responsibility and who are powerful would not come after you. Now, there's also denying of facts fitting the legal definition of genocide. Here I would give you an example. For example, in the deniers of the genocide against the Tutsis, they say there was no systematic plan to exterminate the Tutsis. But as the ambassador told us, and as we know from fact, there were lists already before the genocide committed. There were distribution of arms. In each single district, you have 150,000 perpetrators who would actually engage the rest of the population to commit the genocide. So there was a clear, and the former prime minister of the time, Kambanda, agreed that he himself organized meetings in which the plan was actually to lay out the process of killing. So systematization was there. But some would deny one side, say, okay, there was acts of genocide, but there was no genocide. Next. Now, just to conclude, it's very important to know these stages. Not in every single situation you would have exactly the same kind of, layout of the science. But at least from this, you can always tell if there's something that is cooking. And this is the time to react. And as I was challenging you, young people, you are equipped with goodness, and you are equipped with your intellect, and you are more sympathetic people because you do not act out of interest. So if you see something like this happening, now you can create, WhatsApp groups, you can create Facebook groups, you can actually do more than what people do with their speeches or with resolutions. So I encourage you actually to engage also in genocide studies because it will make you much more aware. Here I have addressed a list of some of the leading scholars' works. If you need to get interested more, to read more, to know more, you can recourse to them and this will be available. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that exhaustive presentation. I'm sorry that I had to rush you. Maybe I can put a proposal down to the ambassador. Perhaps we need to have a whole day seminar and invite the professor and other scholars to begin to engage, because you really opened our eyes, going into the history of genocide, where it has taken place in the world, to say that, in fact, Rwanda is not unique in this sense, talking about the political context and all of that. So I really want to thank you very much for that. It was really an eye-opener. Let me now give the opportunity to the young people. You've had the presentation presentations. The professor did make the point that genocide can happen anywhere in the world. And we know in Kenya here, there are many problems that you are attempting to resolve. Which is why it is important also to have this kind of conversation, so that as we begin to identify some of those early warnings that could, if we don't manage properly, could get out of hands, it's important that we bring experts who can speak authoritatively, to this. So let me open. You state your name and you pose a question or a comment. I'll give you 1 minute so that we have as much questions as we can. I can take a round of maybe 4 for a start, and then we will ask the experts to speak, and then if we have time, we'll come again to a second round. So who is the bravest one? Yes, I have 1 here, 2. Okay, let's go to the back there. 3, 4, okay, and 5, okay. Let's start with those 5. So let's start with you, but be brief, okay?
Yeah, my name is Zakaria. I am from Nigeria. Actually, the issue of when you look at the history, according to the way the professor has analyzed it, we see that genocide that happened in Rwanda is not the first. There are series of genocide that has happened. And you figure out that, like the ambassador has said also, that before these things happened, we've already seen the sign. There are signs that these are going to happen. But some people who are in power, some people who are in authority, choose to look other way around. This is very clear in all the genocide that has happened in the 19th century and in the 21st century. And we don't have to look at the past alone. We need to look at what is happening in the Middle East and see how things are happening. And people, especially United Nations, are systematically keeping quiet. So it has always been the issue of genocide before it happens. People know about it, and they know that something like that will happen, but people just intentionally keep quiet. What is happening in the Middle East is a very perfect example to explain that. But my question is, let's bring it down to African context, because this is our home, and this is where it concerns us most. I figure out that it's not always good to point fingers, because we need to accept that we need to be responsible. But most of the time, the problem we have in Africa, and especially something that has to do with genocides and crises, is because those people who have the moral right to tell other people that, no, what you are doing is wrong, keep quiet. When the genocides happened in Rwanda, neighboring countries were keeping quiet. African unions were keeping quiet. There are things that happen. If this set of people keep quiet...
Get to the point now.
The point I'm saying is that the solution to a problem like this, could it be as a result of people who are in the position of authority keeping quiet or deliberately looking aside?
2? Yeah, go ahead.
Right, good afternoon. My name is Miriam and I am a lawyer. But I have 2 questions for the good professor. Thank you so much for your presentation. And my first question is, it goes to the construction of Article 6 of the Rome Statute, as well as Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, that reads that genocide is limited to 4 categories of groups, which is the national, ethnical, racial, or religious groups. And I'd like to know what comprises a national group? What category of people would you put in a national group? My second question goes to the situation with the homosexuals in Uganda. And we are seeing a lot of state-sanctioned persecution, murder, corrective rape, discrimination and persecution, and which has brought to the culmination of the anti-homosexuality bill that was, although struck down on the basis of a technicality, it still sanctioned or still allowed that, homosexuals should be murdered. They also introduced crimes such as aggravated homosexuality, literally unclear things that are going to be punished through the crime of murder. So what I want to, through the punishment of murder. So what I want to understand is it possible for genocide to be legalized through policy? And can you call the situation in Uganda a possible genocide of the homosexual group?
Okay, thank you. Number 3 was here at the back there.
Okay, my question is this. I want to know, my question is directed to the ambassador. I want to know, according to you, would you say that Rwanda is experiencing positive or negative peace? My name is Petronila. I wanted to know, according to the ambassador, in his opinion, I want to know, does he think Rwanda is experiencing positive peace or negative peace? And my reason for asking this is just because people are not fighting does not mean that people are at peace. So I want to know, in his opinion, does it mean that Rwanda is experiencing complete positive peace or negative peace? Thank you.
Thank you. Number 4 and then number 5. Then I'll come to the...
Thank you. My name is Melina. I'm from Strathmore University. I would like to ask my question to the ambassador. Your Excellency, nowadays we are facing a lot of genocide denials. Some saying that it was a double genocide, others saying that it is the RPF in Otanyi that started the genocide against its own people. What does the government do about the denials, and what do you think that as the youth of Rwanda can do about that? Thank you.
Then number 5.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Odeng. I'm from Moi University. I have 2 questions. One is, where was the rest of the world when all of this was happening? Because it's like...
Okay, so the second question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, what plans are we personally putting across, especially the UN or the local governments, to ensure that such things never happen again? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we got a set of 5 questions. Maybe if you add the couple there, about 7. There was a question about keeping silent when it's happening. The AU was mentioned, the regional governments. How do you define a national group? The issue of homosexuality, can genocide be legalized through policy? Is Rwanda experiencing positive or negative peace? Denial, what is the government doing about the issue of denial? Where was the world when all of this was happening, and what are we doing to prevent this from happening? So maybe I start with you, Professor and Ambassador. Professor, you can start, actually. Yeah.
The question about the silence of bystanders, this is one of the features, actually, of genocide. I specifically wrote on inaction of this big institution, be it the church or be it the international community. Now, one of the reasons people tend not to do anything about genocide is simply because there is no political will. And the political will would mean that you commit resources. And they didn't want to commit resources. But if you look even far beyond, like in the case of Africa, the only people who managed to actually condemn what was happening was Nyerere in Tanzania. It was Nelson Mandela in South Africa. These are like icons, moral leaders. They are not simply politicians. They were the only one who actually spoke out. Now, others would hide behind some of the agreement that was there in African unity in the process of fighting against, fighting for independence, that they would not aggress each other, they would not mix into the internal business of their states. So that was basically the reason most of African countries could not do anything about it. Now, internationally, you wouldn't expect France to be the one speaking out because it was involved in the perpetration of genocide itself. Or Belgium, who had a lot of history about that, who actually ended up abandoning some of the survivors. So it's simply, as I said at the beginning, those people who are in power, they have so many things on their hands. And to condemn what they have committed elsewhere would backlash. And so they do not want to. Others were not just interested. They say, who cares about these Africans? And this whole dehumanization of Africans, saying these are savages killing each other, so we have nothing to do with that. Whereas they actually had everything to do with it. So that's basically what is happening. Now, in the case of your own country, Biafra was actually an instance of genocide. And the killings that took place at the time, really, you could actually name some acts of genocide into it. But who would condemn it? Because some of the countries who were powerful enough to condemn, they were involved with the government, which was committing the very crimes. So this is where we actually need to go beyond the state system and start operating also from the perspective of non-state actors, because you have free hands. And if you look around, people who manage to actually step against genocide, either did it on their behalf. Like during the Armenian genocide, there was a US ambassador, Morgenthau. He was the person who actually stood and said, no, this is a genocide. In Rwanda, Dallaire did actually disobey in some sense, which is something hard to do as a soldier. But he was able to say, no, there is something bad happening here, so we have to do something. So on an individual basis, it's much easier than to do it as an institution, because institutions have interest to defend, and they do not want to commit their resources without a justifiable reason. That was I am not so sure if you are satisfied, but if not, we can talk after this. Now, the second question was about Uganda and the case of homosexuals. You do not need actually to see those categories. I mean, when we talk about human dignity, whoever is human, even the disabled, even the unborn, by the way, he has the dignity. So for that very reason, he's not supposed to be harmed in any way. Now, would this lead to a genocide of homosexuals in Uganda? I don't think so. Probably if in the long run come up a leader who would actually try to single them out and go through the whole process we saw, then you can reach that extent. But as things stand, I don't think we have to fear. But of course, whenever you see a human person is not dignified, is not treated as a dignified human person, you have to worry. That is one of the first steps. And you can build around that.
Okay, thank you. Ambassador?
Please. Thank you very much. I think that Zakaria is asking a very pertinent question of the people who are in power whose responsibility, primary responsibility, is to protect. Now, at national level, unfortunately, during the time of genocide or any atrocities, it is the people in power who actually commit the crime, that they have failed to do their primary responsibility, constitutional responsibility to protect. When they descend on their own people and begin to kill them, then which other level do we expect to deal with the issue? And that's where now United Nations Security Council was supposed to intervene in Rwanda in 1994 and in other situations. I did say it during my earlier submission that Romeo Dallaire, the general, got the information from his informants that actually we are having a list of Tutsis being drawn, identified by names, professions, and the locations and number of families. And because of the training of militias and some literature he has been reading, he was sure there was an imminent threat to the lives of Tutsis. That's why he called for support from Security Council. Why didn't they act? I think Dr. Father Elzie said it. There are a number of factors. US had been in Somalia, they lost soldiers there who were dragged on the streets. So Clinton was not willing to be involved in another crisis of the American soldiers dying in that tiny, small African country somewhere in Central Africa. But at the same time, as he said, these stereotypes, these are Africans fighting. You can't imagine how much time they spent in New York trying to interpret what was happening, whether it was a genocide or not. And Albright said actually they were just acts of genocide. And the time they spent discussing what was happening there, in the meantime, as I said earlier, 10,000 people are being killed every day. Now, to your question, we talked about the colonial period, how they divided the Rwandans, they gave them ethnic IDs, they supported them, the extremists and all. We can't blame the colonial masters forever. We can't continue as Africans to blame the United Nations Security Council forever. That's why we applaud what ECOWAS did when it entered into Gambia, when there was an imminent threat to the lives of hundreds of civilians there because of the elections. East Africa has created one important body called EASF, East African Standby Force, well-trained, well-equipped, that is supposed to intervene in any of the countries that form that organization in case there is a crisis, genocide or otherwise. So hopefully, just to make sure that you don't live in despair, that in the absence of the UN forces, our regions have created forces. We have IGAD, we have ECOWAS, we have ESF, we have ECAS, we have a number of standby forces that are supposed to intervene whenever there is a crisis. In fact, they have to be mandated by the AU summit, but there is a clause that says after 14 days, if the heads of state have not reached the resolution to send the troops, the standby forces will go in. For me, that gives me a hope that anything, God forbid, similar to what happened in Rwanda, happens somewhere in one of the countries, these standby forces will be able to stop anything like that, using the example of Gambia through ECOWAS. Petronina asks a question in a style, but I want to say that we get those questions from many different friends around the world when they ask, is this stability we are seeing in Rwanda and transformation and prosperity going to be sustained? And when they ask that, they ask the model of our governance and democracy. I want to tell you and the rest of the students that Rwandans learned these things the hard way. There's not a single Rwandan today who is ready to go back to where we came from. What gives me confidence is because even in our constitution, and the leaders of today of Rwanda believe that it is only through building a common identity that we will be able to overcome the problems we faced in the past. In the preamble of our constitution, we talk about our unity. But it's very important. Your question also speaks to something very, very critical. If you have a very serious president, like our President Kagame, who single-handedly with his troops was able to stop the genocide when the entire world was just standing and watching, understands clearly that you can only sustain what you have achieved through building institutions. You know, you can have a crazy president in a particular country, but as long as you have strong institutions, then you can easily overcome any challenge that comes along with any rogue kind of a leadership. So what Rwanda is doing, the reason why I want to say to you is that the way we are building our institutions in a very inclusive way, Rwanda is experiencing sustainable peace. There is one thing that you should understand. If you do this without the sense of ownership of everybody, if you have not brought everybody on board to be part of the process, then eventually at some point, you don't have any interest because you're not part of the process. So what we have done is to bring on board the whole spectrum of our population, from women to youth and everybody else. And of course, put in place laws and instruments to make sure that what we've been discussing, denial, genocide ideology, are seriously punished, to make sure that what happened in Rwanda will not happen again. So we will sustain this peace through building institutions that will last, that will provide services on equitable basis, but also ensure that this is owned by the people of Rwanda and not by the leadership. The other question from Medina on the denial of genocide, I spoke about it this morning. He spoke about it. It is a tool. You see, like the people who committed genocide, he just actually said it. The masterminders of genocide are not ordinary people. The intellectuals like you and me who actually have our agenda, but we use the poor people. I just give you one example. I used to be a provincial governor. There is one truck driver, the truck driver who used his money he got from his business to pay young people to go and bring the head. Cut one head of a Tutsi, I give you one bottle of beer. You get a bottle of Tusker in exchange. So, those people, they will definitely, in their entire life, deny what happened. Now, most of them who are very intelligent, the masterminders, not the guy who went and hacked a person and brought a head. They left the country because they had passports, they had money to buy tickets, so they're in Europe. So what they do is to use their network and their cronies to actually propel a narrative that this was not a genocide, it was actually an ethnic conflict, tribal conflict. So denial will be with us for some time. At some point I was desperate, but one friend from Israel told me they still face the same problem. The role of youth that you asked, I think it's very critical to participate in such kind of discourse, but also be aware that the denial is not done out of nothing. It is done as a cover-up, kill the memory, so that at some point this thing will happen again because we shall have forgotten. Dennis, where was the rest of the world? Yeah, it's the same question what Zacharias. But let me tell you something. Let's not be naive. As Africans, we need to come together and protect our continent and make sure that these things do not happen among us. Why? Because nobody will come to rescue this continent. President Obasanjo of Nigeria, former president, when he was a lieutenant, he's a general now, and maybe he's in his 70s. When he was a lieutenant, maybe in his 20s, he was part of peacekeeping force in DRC. Then Zaire. Imagine 70 years later, we still have peacekeepers in DRC. Why haven't they resolved the issues in Congo? Because it is Africa at the end of the day. So it is through ECOWAS, it is through East Africa Standby Force, it is through our institution, the African Union, it is through the youth of this continent that we should say no to the killings to our fellow countrymen and women. So I think, for me, I won't really bank so much on what UN will do, but rather on our brothers and sisters on the continent who are in the military and leadership. And it is you people, the young people, who will be in some of these positions. For some of us, we are retiring, we are walking out, and I think you'll be the ones to take the positions. But understand that there is nobody who is so sympathetic that they will send their sons and daughters to come and die for you, when you yourself have created your own problems. So I think on that question, what plans? I think the continent is trying to really come together and say we can protect this continent without waiting for the strangers to come and do it for us.
Thank you very much to the two of you. Let's give them a hand. I don't know if you are in so much of a hurry, but I really would want to give maybe 2 or 3 more questions. I see very young people. All of you are young, but I see babies almost. There's a young little guy there, you know, that young one there. Do you want to say something? You want to speak? You've been listening attentively, and he has not dozed off throughout. Do you want to say something? No, it's okay. I'm sorry for picking up on you. If you want to say something, we'll give you time to speak, okay? But let me open up again. Let me start on this side. One, let me, 2, right there. And let me get 3. And, okay, 4. 4, yes. And if the young kid wants to say something, we'll give them time. So let's start 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, good afternoon. Name is Ricardo, and I have a question. According to social disorganization theory, crime is highly related or linked with places where it takes place, insinuating that.
Number 2.
Thank you very much. My name is David from Kwea. I have 2 questions. One I would like to ask UN, the other one government of Rwanda. So first question, I would like to ask UN, according to what happened in Rwanda, we see UN kept silent, and now it is still keeping silent according to what is going on in the world. So what are you doing in order to prevent genocide to be happened anywhere? Thank you. The second question I would like to ask government of Rwanda, is anything that government is doing in order to collect different testimonies from survivors so that they can help next generation to know what was going on in Rwanda? Thank you very much.
Okay. Number 3. Number 3.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to ask a question. I'm Janet from University of Nairobi. And my question goes this. Do you think the youth have resources and capacity to spearhead for change? We have seen some student leaders like the one who was in the Meru University Chuka University. He was killed while he was protesting for the students and benefits of the students. And also we have also seen in another university, which is in Nairobi, Kenyatta University, where the student leader also has also been discredited, and we find that the student body is a little bit inactive. It's no longer that much active. So my question goes whether the youth can change the wars or genocide in...
Can I throw that back at you? You know, because you know why?
Yes.
They will speak, okay? But I also don't believe in adults speaking for young people, especially this generation. We need this kind of intergenerational exchange of ideas. You are a university student. You know the realities on campus. You know the issues. You've put your finger on how governments respond, which leads to the death of students and all of that. And you are agitating not in a vacuum, because you have the opportunity to know as opposed to the vast majority of the other young people who cannot go to the university. How do you think the youth will capture that moment? We can tell you, what we think the young people will do, but it would be great to hear the perspectives of young people and say, this is what is happening, this is what we need to do, and how do you support us to do that? So maybe if I can just give you a minute to just share some, I know we are pressed for time, but I'd rather you speak for yourself than to, part of our problem is we have a situation where we come from a generation where, and I'm not necessarily saying it is bad, but we come from a tradition where most times young people are not given a voice to speak, because the adults have to set the agenda. I think the world is changing now. It has changed, and it is going to continue to change. The professor made the point about the incredible amount of power that you hold in your hands as young people. So instead of asking us, the older guys, to define the solution, maybe it should be a two-way flow. So why don't you just take a crack at that? What do you think?
Honestly, I think the stereotyping of the youth, the adults think the youth, they can never say anything, they can never contribute anything. So I just believe that you, who are in the positions, can be able to change because you have that power. Because the youth has no power. So, yeah. So I also think the question still remains upon you, because you have the will to perform and give us the opportunity as the youths.
Right, okay, I take that, but I also know that in this continent, the largest population voting age are young people. So to say you don't have power, I leave that to you to think about it. Number four. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mwangi from the University of Nairobi. So my question goes to the presenter, the professor. What magnitude in terms of killings or other atrocities is considered to be genocide? This is in reference to the United Nations responsibility to protect.
Okay. Number 5, the last one. I had identified somebody. Yeah, we are right there. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. My name is Linda. I'm sorry, I was not number 5, but I have a response to one of the questions that was asked. And thank you for giving the youth an opportunity to interact, because her question was very true on what exactly the youth can do. I would want to say that I'm disappointed first in hearing that she would say that the youth have no power, just as you have echoed. Like in Africa, the youth are the most. We are the significant number. And we don't say significant in matters of just numbers, but significant in the power that you have. We all have power in universal suffrage. That is your responsibility to vote. We are the electorate. You have the responsibility to vote for those leaders who you so claim that they're the ones who would help us. In elections within Africa, we see that most people do not vote. But why is it that we do not vote? And then later you come and complain that our leaders are the ones who are doing or are subjecting us to particular issues. I would blame it on illiteracy and literacy levels within Africa, but that is something that is advancing. Education is advancing among us. The fact that you have come here, the basic question that you should be asking most is, what next after I have come here? Have you just come to sit down and listen to us reflecting on the genocide that happened in Rwanda? But how exactly can you apply whatever it is that we are learning here into your day-to-day life? With the youth, we know what social media is all about. We know the power of social media. And most people would think that social media is there to post pictures and do all that. But after you can get out of here, you can go and write a small post, a small article about whatever it is that you have learned today. That is not going to hurt anyone. You should not do it for no likes, for no nothing. Whoever wants to read it, it is okay. Whoever does not want to read it, the burden of ignorance should be left to the ignorant. Thank you.
So let me come to the experts. Yeah. Social disorganization theory, which talks about crime, is limited in the locality where crime is most. It's a theoretical issue. So maybe I throw that to the professor, because they can open our minds. Sometimes we think theories are abstract, but they are very important also to understand. Yeah.
Excuse me. I did not ask my question. Yes, I had not yet asked the question.
Then thank you very much. Then let's go to the next one.
And how does it apply in this? How does it apply in this particular discussion? I just want to know the.
No, I wanted to ask. Huh? No. The question had not yet come. I wanted to ask. What is the government or what is the international community doing about this genocide that has taken place in Rwanda and other places, besides having commemorations every year? What other steps are they taking? Because the international community oftentimes try to deny that it was actually genocide.
Okay, Professor, and then Ambassador.
Okay, I'll leave that question to Ambassador, as to also the second question regarding UN and Rwanda government role in terms of collecting testimonies. Let me pick on the question of Janet about the youth resources for change. First of all, you should not underestimate who you are and what you do. You should first and foremost take responsibility for your training. Make sure that you do not just have things in your head, but you have to develop a sense of judgment. You have a sense of critical thinking. Because one of the major concern, and which actually disempowers youth, is because they get manipulated. You think that to make change is just to go to the street. But you do not know who is leading you to the street in the first place, and what is his motivations. And if you go across Africa, some of the leaders who lead youth on the street, they do not show themselves on the street. They do not send their children. So you should ask yourself, why should you go if the son and daughter of the person you are fighting for is not sending his own children? And as a matter of fact, if you look at all instances of genocide, the youth that got involved in the genocide, there were people who were manipulated, either because of ignorance or because of poverty. And they expect that if they go into this criminal project, they would inherit something. So it's a total something that... Now, that being said, you have so many things you can do. One of them is to claim your rights. It's not to wait until they give you all your rights on the plate. You have to claim it. I agree with you in some instances, the youth are, somehow sided. You do not give your opinion, you do not, but you have to take the opportunity. Whenever you get a chance, think first, and then second, make your point. That's very important. Now, in terms of resources, you have knowledge, you have relationships, you guys can network across the world, something I didn't have a chance to do when I was your age. You can be connected to people in China, in Japan, Venezuela, all over the place. And that can have a strong impact. So you imagine like if a political decision-making person receives tons of messages claiming something that is right, he cannot sleep that day. But do you take the chance? I refer you to your colleague who, most of these, it is something that is challenging for African youth. We get all these toys, these gadgets. Instead of using them for good purposes, we use them to destroy ourselves. You should be able to develop character and be people of integrity, people who raise issues, not just spending all the time saying blah, 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 blah. This is the best contribution you can bring about. And believe me, most of the people, I talked about Lemkin. Lemkin started as a young man. Our president, ambassador, was talking about. He actually fought for our rights. As a young man, he had to drop out to do it. And most of my contemporaries had to drop their university studies because they understood the future was at stake. So there's a lot that you can do. You have communication, you have access to internet in most of your universities. So this is an asset that you can exploit for the good. And you need to actually think about it and organize, because whatever you have to do, you cannot do it alone. You need to do it in connection with others.
So let's give Ambassador now, because I think the bosses are getting ready so that we are able to save a bit of time.
Can he deal with the issue of numbers?
Yes.
Mwangi? Is it Mwangi?
The magnitude. As I remember, they asked the question to this lady who was in the US government, how many acts of genocide make a genocide? How long are you going to wait to actually move if the genocide have started? It was Christine. She was working in the State Department, and she was a kind of spokesperson. Yeah. So the numbers doesn't matter. A genocide is not a matter of numbers. The intent, if it is clear that there is, a group, whether it is the whole group or in part, which is targeted, which is dehumanized, then that's the time to move. Now, something that has come up as a way of taking responsibility, which we did not have at the time of the genocide against the Tutsis, was this document on the responsibility to protect, R2P. Now, this was actually a UN move to actually try to correct the inaction. But something you needed to know is international politics is so messy. And when it gets to decision making, everyone is just pouring his blanket. So to agree to actually organize a force, to commit the resources, it will always take ages. That's why we should not rely too much, as Ambassador said, to the international community. First of all, if you ask who is the international community, you would not get an answer. Because everyone can blame the international community, but everyone can work within the international community. So what we need to do is actually to do our part and then pressurize the other part. But once we have done already what we need to do. Now, in terms of what needs to be done, especially in this particular situation, is to be very sensitive to the warning signs. Once you are aware of the warning signs, then you can start acting. And this is crucial. The reason that most people would not actually move is because of ignorance. You hear or know there are people who are being killed, you feel it is just one instance. But if it shows that it is a pattern, then we can do something, and then the rest can come up. But you can also fight in so many different ways. Those of you who are doing law studies, those of you who are doing international politics, political science, those are areas where you can commit already from now to actually build up the capacity to be able to address the issues. Thank you.
So the question from Ricardo, I think it was covered in the first round of questions about the steps by the UN, and they responded by talking about the African context and how we Africans should do something. We part of the UN also, we need to keep pushing to make sure that we respond on time whenever there is a crisis. Well, the UN did something after the genocide. They created the ICTR, which is International Criminal Court Tribunal for Rwanda, to handle the high-profile cases, and also supported in the aftermath. But I think we need to do more. But my focus. I think we need, as Africans, to think how we can deal with our own issues than waiting for them. On the, I didn't get the name of the one who asked about the testimonies. That's very critical. You had one survivor giving us the testimony, very compelling story. We have very many, thousands of survivors who have different stories. Those who are raped, those who are handicapped. I had, when I was in the US, we had a girl giving a testimony whose hand was chopped, not using machete or anything, but stone. Hit the hand until it was off. So we have the whole spectrum of terrible things that the criminals did. So what we are doing to deliver that, to make sure that we address that issue, that people can actually access these people online. The National Commission to Fight Genocide, assisted by some of other partners like Aegis Trust, which is a London-based organization, they have collected so far unedited more than 450 testimonies. And the beauty of this, we talked about the denial of genocide. The beauty of what this commission is doing is they are collecting testimonies from the survivors, but also we are getting testimonies from the perpetrators. So whoever denies that it didn't happen, the perpetrators give you the story of how they committed specific crimes. And actually they give you the names and the location and time and how many militias, how many family members were killed in that particular testimony. So that's something, and I think if you go to kwibuka.rw or CNRJ, which is the National Commission to Fight Genocide, you'll get, we can share through the network we have in the UN, the websites that you should visit and listen to these testimonies. And I think they have subtitles for those who do not speak English, like what we had this morning. So that's being done, and it's very important to keep the memory, but also to educate people who are not aware of what happened in Rwanda. I don't want to totally dismiss the question asked by Janet. I agree with what Linda said in response to what Janet said. I agree with what Dr. Father Elise said in response to the question Janet asked. But to me, it's a very relevant question, especially when we are talking to policymakers. I do not agree with the part of it where you go and destroy property through strikes and all, and then you expect to walk away with it. But I agree with you when it comes to the point where the policymakers have to put in place instruments and mechanisms and policies and laws to allow the youth to be part of the whole movement of transforming our nations, because they constitute a big part of our population. Rwanda has taken deliberate policies on the youth to make sure that they are part of what the conversation discourse, national discourse we have on how we transform Rwanda and make sure that what happened in Rwanda will not happen again. Youth is part and parcel of that. I agree, you don't have to sit back and wait for people to do everything, but you are asking a pertinent question. What is that people in power are doing today to include the youth, give them the opportunity to participate? Let me give you an example. The political organization that I come from, for so many years, the National Executive Committee members were the founders, the old people, the thinkers behind the movement. And all of a sudden, by 2013, 12, around there, people were like, huh, these are the guys who started this movement in 70s and 80s. Where are these people that you are talking about being empowered? Now, they are part of national executive committees where I don't even sit myself. So whatever is being discussed at that level, we have the youth. When you look at how the ministries and the counties and all government institutions are, the constitution of the staff members, I can assure you we have more than 60% more who are less than 40 years and below. I think that just recently one principal secretary who was appointed to the Prime Minister's office, she's maybe less than 30. So I think there should be a deliberate policy. Another example is, for many, many years, when it comes to bank loans, accessing finance for small projects, we didn't have anything for the youth, because you go to the bank, they ask you for collateral. So we created what we call BDF, Business Development Fund, that will give you guarantee as long as your project is viable, but you don't have collateral. This fund will guarantee you so that we empower the youth in terms of economic empowerment. So I think the question she's asking, when you look at it from that perspective, is very relevant, and I think it is the responsibility of governments to really look at it from that point of view than saying they're energetic, they are young, they should fight for it. You are given an opportunity to study. You are not studying and you go on the street to destroy property, and if you are hit, you don't cry foul. But I agree with you when it comes to the point of policymakers to make sure the youth is become part and parcel of the transformation agenda. I think that was I didn't leave anything behind on that one. Yeah.
I think that's whatever may have been left now will be continued because we're really completely out of...
I mean, if you are not rushing, I know we didn't have lunch, but I feel so bad to leave some maybe serious questions unanswered. You can take one round. I'm ready for this, unless if you tell us what to do. 5?
The challenge we have is time, because the buses will have to take the students back to their destinations.
Maybe let's do this. If you think you have a similar question that has been asked, please don't.
Something so burning, something really, really that
really
has
unique.
been addressed.
The moment you start speaking and we realize it has been asked, then we will not respond.
So my question is on justice. I don't think anyone else has asked on that. So my question is, when military assistance was brought to Rwanda, some of the assistance that was brought, not most, but some of them committed atrocious crimes. Some of the Frenchmen and some of the Belgians committed atrocious crimes, yes? And when they were taken to court to be tried, they were all given sentences that were less than the Rwandese people that were captured. So, and I wanted to reference one Belgian
soldier
person in the radio who was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but only served 12, and then was released. So my question is, when this happens around the world and other foreign forces intervene, will justice really be served if they actually commit atrocious crimes? Yeah, that's it.
Okay, let's take that one.
I think that's a very pertinent question. And you see, in our particular case, we had a situation where a foreign force supports the militias to kill people during the broad daylight. And the cases you are referring to, some of them who are taken through justice, I can tell you it's not even a fraction of those who committed those crimes. We are now seeing some of them coming forward and talking about what happened actually during that time. So we have a saying in our language that if you take the case of a monkey to a baboon, maybe the baboon will say, "This is my kin, so go," and the smaller fish will be affected. So I think that's the situation, because these are Africans and these are other people. So, but you're asking a very serious question that is actually constitutes a very intense kind of legal, political science, international discourse on how we can ensure non-selective justice.
Yes, I think this is a very important question, and it has not happened just in Rwanda. It's happening with the French paratroopers who were accused of abuse of children in the Central African Republic. All we know, they shipped them to France, pretending that they would be tried, but we haven't heard anything so far. And this is a serious crime. And so justice is a process. I think we need to continue to claim justice, not just to sit by and wait. And one of the way of approaching this, because is to work in open networks. Like in France, they have something that they call like popular tribunal, where you do not go through the regular tribunal, but you bring up the case. So by bringing up the case and gathering the evidence, you actually make some kind of pressure which might end up actually taking the case seriously. But they are, when we shift from the juridical situation, there is a lot of politicking that is being involved. And some of these nations, they pretend none of their citizens should be tried outside of their country. But they feel they are entitled to judge other nationalities. So this is one of the reasons we continue to claim our justice and also to claim to have a voice at the Security Council. Because if you have a voice, it makes a difference. Some of these issues can be raised at the highest level and get some kind of input. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. I think you also need to clap for yourselves. It has been a very rich discussion. We're getting, there's a web address that is being typed now, but as you do that, I want to thank you very much, and I would like to appeal to the ambassador. Maybe we would have an opportunity to have more of these kind of conversations because it is very important that we engage the young people, so we can take that on the side. But just before you leave, I want to leave you with two thoughts. UNESCO, which I work for, has in its constitution, the preamble of the constitution says, I'm quoting now directly, that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men, and women for that matter, that the defenses of peace must be constructed. In other words, genocide, it doesn't come overnight. People have thought about it, they have strategized, we've seen, we've gone through all the stages and all of that, and therefore it is really a battle of the mind. We have to capture the minds of people to be able to get them to think in the framework of peace. And so this conversation is very important. I want you to reflect on that as you leave. Lastly, a few weeks ago, I think about 3 weeks ago, I stood on this same podium, and there were 1,200 students in this room who were participating in the East African Community UN Model UN. And the theme that they had for the discussion this year was in Swahili. Let me try my Swahili. I'm not a local, but let me try what it said, and I try to situate it in context, because the professor did challenge you that you have a lot of power in your hands. You shouldn't just use your mobile phones to play games and all of that. You should also use it to take action. And here is what it says, and I want to leave you with that thought. It says, nilikuja, niliona, nilitenda. Nilikuja, niliona, nilitenda. I came, I saw, and I acted. In the past, in the old days, we used to say, I came, I saw, I conquered. That conqueror mentality is what we have to push on the side. Let us take action when we see things going wrong. So as you leave, reflect on it. What are you prepared to do as an individual in your community? What are you prepared to do as a collective, as young people, to try to challenge the status quo that promote the kind of division? So again, as you leave, think about it. Nilikuja, niliona, nilitenda. You must take action. Thank you very much. It has been a wonderful opportunity to exchange with you, and look forward to meeting you again soon. There is an announcement about the bus. The buses are outside. They are waiting for you. We're way past time. We're supposed to be out here by 2, but it's okay. This was great. So as you leave, there will be no time for networking. Just go out straight and catch your buses so that you don't get stranded, okay? Thank you very much, and God bless you. Just the web address. I can read it for you if it's not yet on the screen. It's www.Genocide Archive Rwanda, one word, Genocide Archive Rwanda, is one word, .org.rw. It's up now, okay? So make sure you visit and get, familiarized with the website and get all the resources. Thank you.
Imagine I have raised my hand like 10 times. Now what can pay? I wanted to ask a question on, the Wagala one. Wagala massacre. Wagala is also a massacre. So, the difference between genocide and Wagala.
Kumfotora. Naweza kufotora kabla basi. Ikibazo cyanjye ni iki?
Somebody has lost his ID, yeah? Yes. If you've lost your ID, kindly pick it from here. What's her name?
I can take it to
the embassy. Okay.